on your end?
Yeah, now it is.
Oh, yeah, there it's we're
Yeah,
on.
we're on now, Ruth. Well, good morning, Ruth.
Good
Thank
morning.
you. Thank you for meeting with me this morning.
You're very welcome.
Ruth, before I go to some of the questions that I posed for you to be talking about during this event today, I wanted to introduce you and how you and I have been connecting over the years to the listeners. And when I thought about it yesterday, it was I went as far back as remembering that I messaged you a few years ago when you were going to teach my grandson Joey how to play guitar. Do you remember? It was quite a while ago.
It was, yes.
Yeah. And the other thing I remembered is while I was working on seminary papers, there were a few people that helped me, and your name kept popping up. Check in with Ruth. She'll help you. She's excellent. And so then it took a few years, because there were some obstacles in that. But I believe it's been about a year or so when you and I have really connected. And I've had the privilege of not only working my way through this book that you have written, okay, and it's called Write From Book Idea to First Draft in 30 Days by Ruth L. Snyder. I worked my way through that. And guess what? I found Twitter Decoded. And I found this an amazing little book to help me get started with Twitter, because I had this Twitter account, but honestly, I didn't know. What is a hashtag? How do you post anything? So your little book has really helped me a lot, and I'm still not very active, but I do post now. Even I've posted a couple of videos and that. So I appreciate you having written your books.
Good. I'm glad
Um,
you're finding them helpful.
the other thing I would like our listeners to know is that I took part in your course and I wrote it down. It was called 30 Days to Write Your Best-Selling Book Outline,
Mhm.
right? And now that was, it stretched me. Your course stretched me, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm like, really, all I want to do is write. Why do I have to research this thing that I want to write about, on Amazon and all those places? But your stretching, I believe, has helped me to become a better writer. Okay, I'm just so
Mhm.
much more informed, and so again, you've been very helpful to me.
That's
And
great.
of course, I listen to a lot of your Facebook Live presentations, and there's always a little nugget in there for me to remember and to keep challenging myself. Um, the big thing, Ruth, that what happened is that you coached me. I believe I had 6 coaching sessions from you.
Mhm.
And I remember, I didn't have too many questions, but I had a lot of things on my mind, that I needed to just run by you. And when I think back to it, um, there would be maybe 1 or 2 points that you would make in a coaching session that would kind of be like a light bulb to me. And I just ran with them. And some of them, when I did them, like, for example, this is the book we're going to be talking about.
Mhm.
When I had, gone on live, Kindle Live, I have since then taken it down because my book wasn't quite finished, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But again, I've just embraced some of the teachings that you have given me and just kind of ran with them. And but then sometimes backtracking a bit because there is a better way
Mhm.
of doing what I'm trying to do.
Mhm.
And one more thing I wanted to our listeners to know is that I actually met you in person the first time when I was working at Page Master Publishing.
Right.
And I know we both have published books through them, and Page Master Publishing, they have copied a lot of my CDs that I've produced and that. So We met there in person when you picked up your book, Equipped, right? Your devotional.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's one book I don't have yet, but that's when we met in person.
Right.
So I just wanted our listeners to know that this time that we're sharing, it didn't happen out of the blue, right? We have over the years developed a working relationship.
Mhm.
And, I know we've prayed for each other and visited. I've visited you a couple of times. So, and yeah, so it didn't just come out of the blue. There is a purpose for having this discussion. And so I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your life to meet with me today.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you. It's great to see my clients be successful. That's why I do what I do. And it's interesting how, yeah, God puts those nuggets in, and sometimes it doesn't mean a lot to me, but it's a big aha moment for my clients. So
Mm-hmm.
we just have to learn to be faithful and listen to those little nudges that God gives us, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so the first question, if we can get into that I posed for you is because my book, Evil Lurking, right? It started as a stream of consciousness explosion, right? I mean, I was taking a couple of courses at seminary, and all of a sudden, just this flow of ideas and words came. I couldn't stop them. Like I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I had once before experienced that, but during this time, I had 3 or 4 things happening at the same time. And so I had asked you whether or not you have ever experienced something like that as an author.
So I think our writing styles are very different, and that's okay because each individual has what works for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we try to fit into a mold that somebody is trying to fit us into, it doesn't work very well.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to be more of an outline planner type of writer, whereas you tend to be more of a pantser, stream of consciousness, let it flow kind of writer. And
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with either one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have I wrestled as an author? Yes, there have been times when, well, I mean, going right back to the beginning, when I've always enjoyed reading and writing, but I didn't really take that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
After we adopted twin boys with developmental delays, I felt like their story needed to be shared with a broader audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw a writing contest, and God tapped me on
Mm-hmm.
the shoulder and said, "Okay, do this." And I kind of wrote I wrote about our journey through infertility and into the world of adoption and special needs,
Mm-hmm.
and sent it off to the contest and said, "Okay, God, I did what you told me. Now leave me alone." But he had other plans, and I received an email informing me that I won first place in the contest, and the prize was a writing conference in Ontario. I knew nobody there. I
Mm-hmm.
walked in feeling like a total fraud because I was surrounded by other people that had published before, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know if I was a writer yet.
Mm-hmm.
But God used that conference to just confirm his calling and help me start honing my skills and figuring out how I could
Mm-hmm.
squeeze writing into my schedule. I mean, I had 5 children ages 1 to 12 at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes when God calls us, it feels like an impossible dream, but he helps us figure it out.
Mm-hmm. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the journey, right? That the figuring out and that's how we develop trust in him, right? That he actually knows what he's talking about.
Mhm.
And regardless of obstacles and pain and suffering in between time, he does bring us to the place where we accomplish what he sets out to accomplish. Not in our timetable, because I wanted this book done the first year. Okay, I didn't know I had more to learn, right? I honestly, I don't know how many times I've rewritten it, and it is getting better and better all the time. But it has a lot of input from other people. I've
Right.
just invited others in. So, so wrestling is part of writing. Then you're saying part of being an author.
Definitely. I mean, another time that I did wrestle, was when God told me to write my book called Equipped.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, spiritual warfare is not a topic that you tackle just
Mm-hmm.
because you want to tackle that topic.
Mm-hmm.
And God told me to write about that topic. I resisted because I knew that there
Mm-hmm.
would be spiritual attacks, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know if I was ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we wrestle.
And I relate to that because my topic is, talking about a community that was impacted by childhood sexual abuse, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the all my characters are all fictitious, like I made them up, but not really, because even my friend Chris Cardinal, who has written, some comments for the back page, and that he knows that he in part inspired this book,
Mhm.
right? And together we worked through some of his recovery. Um, how should I say it? Some of the obstacles that he went through in order to recover, and so it's there has been some opposition to this, right?
Yeah.
And what keeps me going, Ruth, and I think I'm going to step away a bit from my list of questions that I have for you. What reminded me always, because you always seem to be saying, don't write without a prayer team. You got to have a prayer backup team. You got, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have anybody. How do I find them?
Mm.
And so it's like, even when you share in your Facebook lives, in your teaching moments, in your classes, it comes up all the time. Can you tell our listeners why that is so important?
Well, if we are a Christian and if we are writing, uh, I mean, Satan his whole goal is to steal, kill, and destroy.
Hmm.
And so he doesn't want people set free. He doesn't want
Hmm.
the truth to go out.
Hmm.
He wants to keep people in bondage. And so when we step out to change that, he is
Hmm.
going to put up resistance.
Hmm.
And in my life, I have experienced times I have a son who has seizures, and I fully
Hmm.
accept that it's a medical condition. However, the timing of the seizures is very suspicious a lot of times because
Hmm.
I will be stepping out into a new project or working with a new client, and that's when he has his seizures, and he hasn't had one for months.
Hmm.
And so, um, yeah, it's different things. And even in my work with InScribe, when we're working on fellowscript, there was one day when Dale went to print fellowscript, and
Hmm.
every single one of his machines broke down that day.
Hmm.
And that just doesn't happen to him usually.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
think I was there that day, if I remember correctly. Like, yeah, one of the issues for sure, like we had quite a bit of trouble getting it printed. Yeah, you bet.
yeah, so I mean, prayer is a powerful weapon, and I don't
Hmm.
think that we understand how powerful it is, and I don't think we use it as often as we should.
Hmm.
Um, and so I really encourage, and this is something that one of my coaches, Shelley Hitz, taught me,
Hmm.
and I'm passing on to my clients because it is important to
Hmm.
have a prayer team. The Bible talks about a three-strand cord that can't be broken.
Hmm.
There are
Hmm.
times when maybe we can't even pray. And yes,
Yeah.
the Holy Spirit prays on our behalf,
Hmm.
we need a team. We need,
Mhm.
like when Israel was at war and they came and
Mhm.
held the arms up because the arms
Yes.
were getting tired. We need those people on our side
Yes.
holding our arms up. And
Yeah.
that's what a support team and a prayer team will do.
Yeah.
So I try to do that for other people. I've
Mhm.
started doing for my clients is if they ask me to, I will
Mhm.
join their prayer team. And
Mhm.
something as simple as I put a reminder in my phone to pray for them on a certain day and at a
Mhm.
certain time. And then I
Mhm.
text them and I say, hey, I'm praying for you. Is there anything
Mhm.
specific you want me to pray about? And
Mm.
usually there is something that they need
Yeah.
prayer for.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I hear you saying a couple of things that so any of our listeners, our future listeners, once we post these videos, if they are indeed wanting to write, and if they have the sense that they have a calling to be a writer, whether it's for a magazine or like even Perry Stelter, who recorded a video for Evil Lurking. He writes for magazines and he's written his personal books, and there was a couple of other places he writes for. So if these listeners have it in their heart to do that, it would be really important for them to make sure that they have a backup team, a prayer team supporting
Yes,
them, right?
definitely.
And yeah, so that's really important. And so yeah, because surprises can happen to us at any time.
Hmm.
And I think the other thing I had this thought to mention is another thing is important to listen. Like when the other day God put someone on my heart, and I just
Hmm.
texted this lady and I said, "Hey, praying for you. Is something going on?"
Yeah.
And we ended up talking, and that's what she said. She said, "I really needed someone because
Hmm.
there's so much happening." So listening to the Spirit when we need to pray for someone or asking for help and having someone pray for us is really, really important.
Yes, and not just in our writing. I mean, even in just being part of the body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I was on Facebook one day and I noticed that one person was quite
Mm-hmm.
down,
Mm-hmm.
and she actually was responding to one of my Facebook lives, but
Mm-hmm.
I could tell that there was something deeper
Mm-hmm.
happening, and
Mm-hmm.
God prompted me to reach out to her.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. We had an hour conversation, and she told
Mm-hmm.
me that she had been planning to take her life that night.
Oh, yeah.
And so, it's really important to reach out to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Mhm. Ruth, was there anything else you wanted to share to our listeners before I ask you the next question about evil lurking? Was there anything else about your books or about what you do, about coaching, about your courses? Anything else you'd like to share to our listeners?
Well, you had asked me to share about my book Equipped, so this is what it looks
Mm-hmm.
like. Um, so I used Ephesians 6:10 to 18 as the basic structure for the book,
Mm-hmm.
but then drew in a lot of other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are some devotionals that start with a scripture verse and then a story from my personal life,
Mm-hmm.
and then go into some theology and Bible teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then just a simple question at the end,
Mm-hmm.
like what are some specific things from which God has saved you? Journal
Mm-hmm.
your thoughts or respond in another way that's meaningful to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then a prayer at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, I really hesitated to write this book, and I did get it written within 3 months
Mm-hmm.
and sent it off to an editor, and I'm so thankful for her. When I first wrote it, I didn't include any personal anecdotes in it,
Mm-hmm.
and when the editor read it the first time, she emailed me and she said, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. She said, your writing is
Mm,
very strong and very
mhm,
powerful, but I can tell you're burnt out.
mm,
To put that book on the shelf and just spend some time getting refreshed and letting God minister to you.
mhm,
That was really hard to hear because I was all excited about getting this book published and moving on to something
mhm,
else. But I did take her advice, and it took
mhm,
6 months before God said, okay, it's time to pull it off the shelf and
mhm,
do something with it.
mhm,
But I believe that it is a much stronger book because of those
mhm,
personal anecdotes. And it's, I mean, spiritual warfare is a pretty heavy topic, and the anecdotes just kind of help lighten it a little bit and
mhm,
also give personal authenticity to it. So,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I relate to what you're saying because even evil lurking, it's been was it 2017, right? In the from January to April kind of thing. During that time when it was birthed, I've just had to put it away so many times, and because I just didn't realize there was so much more,
Mm,
right? And because I was just learning to be an author, and then like to take stream of consciousness writing, which comes from the right side of your brain, and to bring in the left side of your brain when you're not a left brain thinker, right? Plus being, in an academic setting, like that can be really challenging. And so then to kind of meld the two, it has taken quite some time.
hmm
And so I totally hear what you're saying. And it's almost like a left brain thinker, they have all the academia, like right there, right to the point, but there is the heart missing, right? The personal touch in that. So,
hmm
so yeah. Would you agree with what I'm saying, or is there another way of looking at it?
No, I think that's fairly clear.
Mm-hmm.
And different people are, some of us are more left brain thinkers and some of us are more right brain thinkers. So we have
Mm-hmm.
to figure out what our strength is and go
Mm-hmm.
from that strength, but also be willing to
Mm-hmm.
incorporate some of the other side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we talked about having a prayer team, a backup team, but then also I believe authors need, like, so for me, I have this book in particular has many people who have, because I belong to the Beaumont Book Writers Club, right? So there were 5 or 6 people that went through each chapter and made recommendations, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, and then other people have participated in reading as well and making comments.
Hmm.
And so there there's another person who is left brained, and he's been helping me with my seminary papers or with my I did a postgraduate in spiritually informed creative arts. He helped me with some of my papers there because the structure, that's just not my thing, but it's so needed, right? Because the poor reader,
Right.
when you have someone who just writes from whatever flows, they're flopping back and forth and thinking, what? Where is she now? Where is she going? What happened? And so we really need a team of people
We do.
who support us. Yeah.
Yes. And if we can have that, you're right. I also have a beta team, beta reader,
Mm-hmm.
and which is what your writing group does for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and those, often we want to show our book or our writing to people that we know are going to be excited and
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, this is wonderful. But
Mm-hmm.
we need people on our team who are willing to be honest with us and say,
Mm-hmm.
no, this is good, but
Mm-hmm.
have you thought of this? Or,
Mm-hmm.
this is really confusing. You could use some more clarification here.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know what? You really don't need this chapter in your book. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I first joined the Book Writers Club, they said to me, "This might hurt, just so you know, because we're not gonna be nicey nice. We're gonna give you the truth. Can you take it?" And I was like, "I don't know, but I'll try it."
That's my baby you're talking about.
You want me to do what? But there, it's just been great. And I've really learned I learned that I have a choice. I don't have to do everything that people recommend.
Right.
But so far, the recommendations have been great. And even though I haven't taken it word for word, like if they would say maybe, how about you add a scene? Like, how about you set up this conversation and kind of describe what's around the people? Because I'm just so into conversations, right? And then maybe actually describing, um, for example, that one conversation is happening in a church, small group room, and so I ended up describing it with curtains and flowers and cherry wood tables and chairs, and just actually describing, but I had never seen it before because I was so focused on the people.
Right.
And then one of the characters, um, Frank, I have to think for a second, I think it's Frank. He's kind of an instigator, and so he, of course, before we get into this heavy duty topic, he says, that maintenance man, you left the paint and the rollers in the corner, and how irresponsible. So then to add kind of little touches to the chapter that still keeps the reader focused on the seriousness of the topic at hand, but it also it's almost like when you're in counseling, right? You
Right.
want to ground people, right? You don't want them to be stuck in all their trauma. You want to help them to, let's take a look around, and what day is
Right.
this, and what can I focus on, kind of thing. So
Right. We
yeah.
think sometimes we think that as nonfiction writers, we don't need any of the skills that fiction writers use. But characterization, like telling us that that person, or showing us that that person is frustrated by the mess, just
Hmm.
adds a little bit of interest. And uh,
Hmm.
it's not just two heads having a conversation, it's actual people
Yeah.
who, besides their trauma and their things that they're dealing with, they have personalities. And
Hmm.
then having a setting where the discussion takes place helps us
Hmm.
understand, because in your book you move settings and that affects the discussion, right?
Hmm.
And you know where they are when they're having that discussion, but if you don't
Hmm.
show the reader, they're going to be
Hmm.
going, huh?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's great that you could incorporate those into your book.
Yeah. And I think my experience working at one of the missions here in Edmonton, and really seeing how people live on the street, and if they use the shelters, there I have some scenes in my book, even where people are going through the soup line, and where they're getting their buns and their donuts and their meal, and then where they're sitting with each other, and even where there is a guy who sleeps around with two women, and they're both sitting together and fighting about him, and so those kinds of things, I would not have been able to add them to the book had I not actually seen it and experienced it
Hmm.
when I was engaged in the ministry downtown. So yeah, some of them are pretty hard. I use some pretty hardcore language.
Hmm.
You wouldn't, I think I've shocked some people. The F word is in there a few times, but it just, you can't not use it in those environments,
Right.
right? It wouldn't be a proper way of describing the environment or the people that I'm talking about without that.
Yeah, and people that are in those situations, if they read your book, they would throw it away if it wasn't authentic, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if people are if they stumble over that, then obviously the book is not for them.
Right. Or it really is for them when
Or
they're ready.
maybe,
What? there ready.
I
Yeah.
know what you're saying.
Yeah. Ruth, I was asking you before reading Evil Lurking. So I'm not sure if you read all the chapters. I had sent you some new ones, but
I
the
did.
parts that you did, okay. The parts that you read about, did you know that in Canada, the residential schools used electric chairs for their students?
You know what? I did not know that. I knew of some of the other terrible things that happened, but I did
Mhm.
not know that electric chairs were part of the picture.
Mhm.
So sad. So,
I was totally shocked. I was writing, and because I had a particular picture in mind, there was someone I wanted to, I was still angry after 20 years, I wanted that person on that electric chair. I was going to push the button myself, I was so angry. Just the total opposite of Kingdom Grace, right?
mm,
And then I thought, well, let's look it up. Like in Canada, can you even put people on an electric chair?
yeah.
And I came across this, and that's how I could tell that this book is God's idea,
Mm,
because I came up with the title. It all came. I had no idea that I would find something like that
mm,
in Canada. Even though I had worked with many people who told me about the residential school experiences, it never came up. But to me, it brought such another level of devastation and
yeah.
to
To put
people's
the pain
lives.
on kids. I mean,
Hmm.
it's one thing to talk about adults and somebody who's murdered somebody being
Hmm.
put on an electric chair, but a child,
Hmm.
an
Hmm.
innocent child,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I
that's
was very shocked.
Satan out to
Yeah,
kill, steal, and destroy.
exactly. Hmm. Yeah. I'm also wondering if you had said and you approved for me to put this comment in my book. Martina, some very heavy material here. It is absolutely necessary that we as Christians act. Could you comment on what you said there?
Well, I think that unfortunately, a lot of times we get complacent in our faith, and we know that God has saved us, and we rejoice in that, and we live our protected lives. And we forget that there are so many people that still need to hear about God and His love and mercy and hope and grace.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we don't go and work in the soup kitchens. We don't go overseas and see the situations there. We don't, um, like even the adoption and foster care system. We don't delve into that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't read about residential schools
Mm-hmm.
or get to know people that have experienced what happened there because it's
Mm-hmm.
hard. It makes us
Mm-hmm.
wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we're so busy earning a living, looking after our own family that we don't. And uh, I mean, God gives us gifts, He gives us money,
Mm-hmm.
He gives us homes to share.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't give them to us to be selfish with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I appreciate what you're saying. And Ruth, I think I want to add that for anyone who is listening to this conversation later on, um, I understand how what we're talking about may lead someone to feel guilty or feel like they're not doing enough. And, it's not my intention, or I believe, Ruth, your intention for us to make anyone feel guilty.
No.
This whole book, it's looking at Christian ethics dilemmas, right? As to what should I do in a situation? What should I do? As opposed to closing off my heart and doing nothing, closing
Mhm.
my eyes and saying, this is not for me, right? And so the wrestling is what happens within the person themselves.
Mhm.
Um, for example, like this last chapter that I'm working on right now, it's on kingdom grace, right? And so, as I said to you, I wanted to push that button for that, put that person on an electric chair. That's not kingdom grace.
No.
I've been a Christian since 1984. I've had a lot of anger issues. Okay. I've done a lot of things, said a lot of things. I've hurt a lot of people,
Mm,
right? And so, how do you get from someone who's done those things to write a chapter on kingdom grace?
mm.
Even in my chapter, I'm wrestling with it. And I said, I think I should stop and let somebody else write about it. I make a comment and I say, there's so many theologians. They're excellent. They know what they're talking about. But Ruth, as I'm writing that, I'm thinking back to being in seminary and
Uh-huh.
us having to read a textbook written by John Howard Yoder, and about the body politics,
Mm.
and how some of the students were making comments that he was an excellent theologian, known worldwide, highly esteemed, and in the Manitoba, one of the Manitoba Bible schools, and at Notre Dame, and highly esteemed. When people were saying that he had at minimum sexually assaulted 80 women
Wow.
and thought nothing of it, you
Mhm.
know. And so I got up and I ripped the book without thinking because I was so angry. Why do we have to read a book like this in
Right.
seminary?
Right.
And as I'm continuing to study, and my chapter is not finished, I'm still working on it. I haven't given up because ultimately it's God wanting to work on my heart.
Right.
You know, um,
It's the story of the unforgiving servant, right?
there you go.
Like how much has God forgiven us? And yet we sit here and we point fingers at other people. And God says, no,
Hmm.
I expect you to forgive because I have forgiven you.
Hmm. And I think in the beginning of our conversation, we said something about, how sometimes God allows things to come into our life to make us stronger, to help us on our journey. And in this situation, I needed to look at two things. I needed to look at, first of all, yes, my own sinfulness and my own lack of kingdom grace flowing through me.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, because I was such like I was a fighter on the inside, but I was not very assertive, right? And I did not know how to speak up assertively. There were several individuals who, during that time, actually taught me how to assertively speak about, because my voice is important too,
It
right?
is.
And so then when these situations arise in our lives, there could be multiple purposes,
Mhm.
right? And so that's what I'm wrestling with right now is but definitely God's finger is not pointing at Yoder. He's pointing at me
Right.
and saying, Martina, what about you?
Right.
And that's really what this book is all about. But I'm not sure. Did I ask you the question? Yes, I asked you the question, right? Why do you believe this is absolutely necessary that Christians have? Is there anything else you could add to what you have already said?
Well, it's interesting. I'm reading a book now. It's actually about 10 years old, but it just came across my path. It's called When Helping Hurts. Maybe you're familiar with it.
Don't know.
Anyway, he talks about how, we often walk into, especially helping people on the street or maybe even going overseas and helping people that don't have water systems or whatever,
Hmm.
and how when we think we know it all, we
Hmm.
actually cause more hurt than we help.
Hmm.
And the way he puts it, actually, it's two authors that write it. Can't remember what their names are right now, but they talk about, we are all hurt. every
Yeah.
single one of us.
Yeah.
And it's only when we acknowledge the hurt in our lives
Mm-hmm.
that we can help other people who are hurt. And so I think that's an important piece of your book as well,
Mm-hmm.
wrestling with our own hurts.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how good a home we were raised in, we all have faults, we all have hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And when we allow God to heal us, then we are able to help others.
Mm-hmm.
And when we understand the grace that God has
Mm-hmm.
given us and
Mm-hmm.
the love that He has
Mm-hmm.
poured on us,
Yeah.
we want to extend that love and grace to other people.
Yeah.
That judgment just disappears, it melts away.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful, right? I'm not sure if I'm the one who's frozen or you. I think something is happening. Um, Something happened to our recording. And I wonder what we should do here.
I'm thinking it's you.
Yeah, I think something happened, Ruth.
We're back.
We're back. Yes. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Hey,
Yeah.
maybe people just needed a few seconds to process what we just finished talking about.
They needed a breather, right? Like, oh, I need a breather. Yes. I kind of asked you another question, and I had said, Ruth, what is the importance of coaching through the process of writing a book?
Hmm.
And I was really curious, from your perspective, what was it like to coach me?
Well, it's really interesting being a coach because every client is so different. And you really can't have a cookie cutter approach to coaching. I mean, if you do, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I have some clients who are very self motivated. You are one of them. And I have other clients who need prodding to make
Mm-hmm.
success, but it's not like they're not willing to be coached. It's just that they need that extra encouragement and that extra
Mm-hmm.
accountability. And so I think, why is it coaching important? I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that as individuals, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And so when you're writing a book, you need a support system, and not just beta readers, but sometimes you need
Mm-hmm.
somebody. I know for you, one of the important things in our coaching sessions was just the ability to air everything out
Yeah.
and kind of talk through the process, and um, even just empty your brains. You had space to think, right?
Yeah.
um, and most of my clients actually say that the most helpful part of coaching is just the ability to talk to somebody who understands the writing process,
Mm-hmm.
who's not judgmental, who listens and gives feedback, and just kind of holds your hand as you walk through the process.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those would be the most important parts of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And often we're too close to our project. We can't see the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so having somebody who does see the big picture is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I absolutely agree. I have a couple more. I think, yeah, I have a couple more questions, but I just had this thought. Is there a particular favorite part in my book? Um,
Hmm.
I didn't prepare you for this one, though. So if you don't have an answer, that's okay.
Well, I really liked your new ending.
The killer hook.
The killer hook. Yeah, it's really good. I think it will get people thinking.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I shocked a few people. I shocked myself actually. But Ruth, do you have any hope, or what is your hope for listeners who are used to turning a blind eye to the suffering of fellow human beings? I had asked you that question.
So my hope is that we will, uh, there's an old song that says, "Let me see this world the way you see, Lord." I think if we make that our prayer, there's no way that we can ignore
Mhm,
the suffering around us. I mean, Jesus came to bring hope. He came to
mhm,
save the lost. And if we think that we don't need help,
mhm,
well,
mhm.
like Jesus, we have to know that we're lost before Jesus can help us.
Mhm,
And the people that are suffering, they know that
mhm,
they need help and they are waiting for people to reach out to them,
mhm,
not in judgment, not with a superior attitude,
mhm,
um, but as a fellow human being, someone who loves them for who they
mhm,
are and
mhm.
someone who sees their potential. Just because somebody's homeless doesn't mean they don't have skills. They do.
Mhm,
I remember one time I was at the Shaw Center and I met a gentleman on the sidewalk and he was asking for money. And so I said, "You know what? I won't give you money, but I will come with you and we could go buy some lunch together." And as we were walking, he said to me, "You must think I'm such a terrible person." And I said, "No,
mhm,
you're not a terrible person. Circumstances happen, choices are made.
mhm.
I mean, I could be on the street. There are people that have gone from being really rich to living on the
Yeah,
street,
yeah.
and who are we to judge?"
Mhm, yeah. Because the tables could turn really easily, couldn't they?
They could.
Yeah,
Sometimes we forget how vulnerable we really are.
yeah.
I mean, some people have borrowed to the
Mhm,
hilt. What would happen
mhm.
if they lost their job and
Yeah,
could get another one?
yeah,
What would happen if the banks all of a sudden called in all the loans
yeah,
overnight?
yeah.
You
Mhm.
know?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think again, my book is about a community. It's just a small community of people, because there are many ways of how we can help outside, in the world, right?
Right.
And every time we turn on the TV, there is another place where could be sending money or doing this and that, and all of those things are good. If we help and do our part, not overextending ourselves, because God, He doesn't ask us to put ourselves in financial distress,
No.
with wisdom. But oftentimes, even we have a neighbor who is, sitting behind their door and just crying all the time and just in desperate need
Mhm.
for someone to just say good morning, or how are you doing, or would you
Right.
like to have a coffee. We don't always have to look so far. We can just check in our little community.
Mhm.
And
True.
yeah.
Sometimes we do get overwhelmed with all the need, and
Mhm.
the starfish story is one of my favorites. I'm sure you're
Mhm.
familiar with that,
Go
where
ahead, tell us.
a gentleman walks along the beach and he's picking up starfish off the beach and throwing them back into the water. And
Hmm.
somebody comes and talks to him and says, "What are you doing? You're wasting your time. Like, there's no way that you can rescue all these starfish." And he makes the statement, "Well, no, it's true. I can't rescue all of them, but I can make a difference for this one."
Right.
And if we are all faithful
Hmm.
in making a
Hmm.
difference for this one,
Yeah.
then this world will be a better place.
Beautiful. I'd like to end on that note, if that's okay with you.
That's great.
Thank you for joining me today, Ruth.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We'll talk again. Bless you.
Look forward to it.